Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire. This is Doug Edwards, and we're here with a great episode with my friend Maury Buchanan. And I'm going to make sure that I get this right. So I'm going to read a little bit of his bio. A youth minister since 1975, was born in Greenwood, Mississippi. Maury became a Christian when he was 19 while working at a radio station in Florence, Alabama. While working in radio in North Alabama, Maury was the play-by-play voice of the University of North Alabama Lions basketball. After many years with Youth for Christ and as a youth minister, Maury led teams of students from his hometown of Nashville, Tennessee, to places like the Dominican Republic and Central America, and saw the powerful change in their lives as a result of those trips. Having been influenced in his early life by speakers like John Perkins and Millard Fuller, Maury began Mission Discovery to serve the needs of the poor in Mexico. Maury and his wife Ann make their home in Gallatin, Tennessee, and have two children, Rachel, Benjamin, and three grandchildren, Bailey, Hayden, and Reese. So, Maury, thanks for being here today, and catch us up from there.
Good to be with you, Doug. I've listened to your podcast. Love being a part of hearing what's going on in the world of youth ministry. I hang out with a lot of kids every summer. Still love the part of going with high school and middle school students on mission trips and watching God unfold an experience that draws them closer to Him. So it's good to be here. It's new for me this year. Is at the beginning of this year, I solely became the founder of Mission Discovery, and Jimmy Rivera became the president of Mission Discovery. I don't know if you know this news, Doug.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there was a letter mailed as of just 2 weeks ago to announce the retirement of Maury Buchanan, me, in September. So I'm walking with Jimmy through the next 9 months of him being president and him to ask of me about his new role. And Jimmy is a friend of 26 years. He's been on staff with Mission Discovery since just after a year of its founding in 1991. And so Jimmy's going to be an awesome leader for Mission Discovery. As you never leave ministry, and people keep asking me, so you're retiring? I don't know that I love that word. We really, I don't know that we have another word to frame that. I really believe that everything we do is ministry, right? So
absolutely.
Or you're behind a desk with kids on staff at a church, or move on to something else, that God never stops using you wherever you are. Everything is ministry. So, yeah, that's a new role for me, and I'm excited about what God has in the future for me. People keep asking, well, what are you going to do next? I said, I just told you. I'm quitting. No, my daughter, I'm with my daughter this week. We ducked out of town for a few days with grandkids, and she says, Dad, we ought to go into coaching or life coaching. I said, I don't know that anybody would want me as their life coach. It's a novel idea that she would even invite me. But that's new news at Mission Discovery. We're just really excited about the staff we have, and we continue to grow and see God at work in big ways through the work of Mission Discovery and short-term missions.
That's great news. I mean, we all need to transition into different things at different times in our life. I remember reading a particular place in Scripture that rabbis, once they reached the age of 50, stopped doing the functions of the tabernacle, but started being the mentor to those rabbis coming up. Of course, 70 is the new 40. I mean, I saw it on a billboard, so it must be true. And you've set a great foundation, and I'm sure that knowing you and knowing some of the things in your life, I remember a few years ago you said, well, I'm not going to Africa anymore. That was my last trip. And your wife said, well, wait a minute, I'm going. So you got to go again.
That's right. I forgot that. You got a great memory. Yeah. Now the interesting part is like Jimmy said, well, what do you want to do? Again, he's the same, he's the other voice from Mission Discovery. And what do you want to do after this September date this year? And I said, well, I'll tell you, I really would love to continue to run the Africa trips for Mission Discovery and our trips in Montego Bay. And so I'm excited about that part. It just happened, though, Doug, that I still feel like I'm in youth ministry. I only know I'm this old when I pass a mirror, and then I look in the mirror and I say, "Good grief, there's my grandfather." What the heck has happened here? But I don't. I see these youth ministers that bring groups on our mission trips, and I think I'm just one of them. I don't feel 65 years old, which is what I am. I don't sense that. Yeah, I'm excited to continue to run the Africa trip. I have good energy for that. It's a great location, and a lot of good stuff is happening in Swaziland related to the ministry we partner with. So, it never ends. I love what I do. It really was a decision based on just good timing for the future of mission discovery for myself and for Jimmy Rivera. So it's about that. I'm excited about God's timing of this event for both he and I.
Yeah, and I've been on several trips with you and Jimmy, and then one time flew into San Diego with a team, and we went down to Tecate with Jimmy, and he was our main guy there. And then, of course, Jimmy Castro was there as well. Most of the time, I would go on a trip that you were on too. And I like that. Number one, we entered Youth for Christ about the same time years ago. We're about the same age.
There's something, though, Doug, that's like that's really inspiring. When I was a young man, I was always inspired. You were too, I know, by Mike Yaconelli and Wayne Rice, who founded Youth Specialties, World Youth for Christ Workers. I just thought, I would love to still be passionate about youth and their journey at their age. And now I am, and I still am. Nothing's changed. The same, here you go. Don't you hope that you're inspiring that 20 or 30-something or 40-something-year-old youth minister to be still podcasting about youth work in their 60s because of their passion for it.
Absolutely.
So that's an exciting piece. So, for me, it was those folks that helped me tune in to a real future in this work of God.
Yeah, I still think of Mike, and I still recommend Wayne Rice's book on junior high ministry, even because it really covers middle school through high school. That book is a classic, and it got me through middle school ministry because Youth for Christ did not train us in middle schoolers at that time. Yeah. We were only trained for high school ministry, and then I was thrust into middle school and high school in a place. And so that book literally saved my life in knowing how to do middle school ministry. It became one of my favorite things to do. And one of the favorite trips of mine with you guys was the border towns in Mexico with middle school students. We would, if we had a large group, we'd build 2 houses. We'd usually build 1, but there were so many groups there that we'd see 5, 6, 7, 8 houses being built at the same time, which is massive for a middle school kid to go, oh my gosh, I built a house from the ground up, and there's nothing I can't do now.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking about this, telling a story to a friend of mine about this middle school student who came from a Texas church down to Reynosa. And these kinds of areas we worked in down in Reynosa, and sometimes narrow dirt roads, wide dirt roads. These houses were scattered all over Reynosa, Mexico. And this youth pastor called me and said, "Hey, listen, I've got a student who has designed our church mission T-shirt this year. He's an artist. The cool thing about him is he was on the Rosie O'Donnell show just a few weeks ago related to his artwork." I can't remember the full story of how he got connected to the Rosie O'Donnell show. This some way back when she had her show. And
right.
So I said, "Well, that's intriguing." He said, "Well, I just wanted you to know that, because I'd like to know if there is a way that you can use his art at VBS." And I said, "Well, absolutely. And I have another idea." I said, "But for sure, tell him to bring his easel and canvas, blank canvas, and all of his tools. But I have another idea, and I'll let you know what that is, because I don't want to scare him or you before you get here. I want you to come on the trip." So he got down there, and he did a cool thing in VBS where he illustrated today's topic. I can't remember which one it was, because it's either one of 3: God's love, man's problem, or God's solution, Jesus. So it was one of those topics he was illustrating with his artwork. I said, "Okay, we've done that. Here's the next thing. I want you to go out." There was this wide street. It had become wide because, first of all, there was a power line running down the middle of this road. And then cars were like dodging mud puddles and all that, so it became wider and wider. I said, I want to put you right in the middle of this mud road. Cars won't be coming fast because it's muddy and it's bumpy, and so it'll be safe. If you're going to be right in the middle, I want you to set up your easel, and what I want you to do is I want you to paint what you see.
Oh.
And I said, I want you to watch what happens. And then when it happens, I want you to stand up and tell where this gift comes from. So sure enough, we got him out there in the middle of the road, and he started painting what he saw. 5 people gathered, then 10, and 15. Just a few minutes, we had 75 to 100 people gathered around him watching. Of course, the more people who gathered, the more people came, right?
Wow.
And he painted what he saw, and they were just watching. Because art, this is a Spanish-speaking culture. There's no exchange of words. They're just watching this young man paint. He's really good.
Mm.
And he finished, and his youth pastor was standing up near him. He says, it's time now. And he stood up and talked about how God had given him this gift of art, that he could paint what he saw, and that each one of us is a unique creation with gifts from God to be used for his glory. And he told his story of what Christ had done in his life. And it was the most powerful thing. This young man was like, he was not when I met him, I thought, well, maybe this is not a good idea, because he seemed really not shy, but not really forward. Art, I don't know if this is true about all artists, but he was one that was pretty introspective, it seemed like, and quiet, but very powerful what happened in that middle school student. So, on that trip, and, you did this as well, Doug. I mean, you used those trips. The trips were like building a house or doing a vacation Bible school. But the beauty of a youth leader who really sees the value of a journey like this is, first of all, building an incredible memory with a student that he'll look back on. And also the time that a youth pastor has just to pull a student or two off to the side. And in the same way we asked that student to paint what he saw, is really for a leader to say, what do you see there? What's different here than at home? Of course, there's a lot, but what do these people need? What are the real needs of the people here that you see just looking around? So for those kinds of reasons, our trips have become that kind of journey for me. It's like, yeah, sure, we have a work we've been invited to do. And, all those houses, we were there by invitation to build from the mayor's office of the city of Reynosa. Mm-hmm. We worked with every new administration who came there, and they invited us to come. And then, of course, we partnered with a local pastor to follow up anyone who trusted Christ during that week. But we found opportunities to use trips to really explore the future of kids' lives vocationally, calling, giftedness, the needs of others. It was an incredible thing that went on just to the side of just the mission trip itself, of building houses and running Vacation Bible School and having an evening program.
And I'll tell you, the evening programs where the value, they're priceless. One of those times, middle school trips, I loved our high school trips. High school trips are great. We did a lot of different things with them. Middle schoolers, I say this about middle school, and that's the most creative time of their life. And I say this, and some people question me on this, but from what I've studied, probably the things we dream of doing in middle school are probably the things we need to do the rest of our lives. That's not true in every case, but most of the time they're stolen away from us because we learn to heed criticism as opposed to our heart and our desires when we get to high school and beyond. Some people are doing what they dreamed of doing during those times. But one time, and we'd always stay at a camp at either Harlingen or McAllen, and I remember my group met around this barn area with this one single light that was hanging over us, and we had a pretty large middle school group at that time. And a girl by the name of April, I remember, unrelated to whatever we were talking about, she just said, God just told me I needed to be baptized. And I said, okay, awesome. And then another kid said, I want to be baptized too. And the entire group, and it could have been peer pressure, it could have been whatever, but we sensed it was a Holy Spirit moment. And we came back, and all but one child was baptized when we got back. And so you have all these variables. These kids are powerful. One of the middle school students, not on that trip, But one of my middle school students who came to know Jesus in his middle school years is now my pastor. What I loved about going with Mission Discovery was I felt like we always learned, and you may have taught me this, never tell parents that they're going to be safe on a trip, that you're going to guarantee their safety. We can't guarantee safety, but we can guarantee that we're going to go with the safest group possible. And I believe that when I went with Mission Discovery, I was as safe as I possibly could be because you guys had the students' safety as well as the staff. But you knew we had children of parents, and these were children. All the way through high school, they're still children. And I felt like you guys had the best possible safety factor of any group out there.
You and I thought a lot about safety based on our Youth for Christ experience because we did crazy things that were allowed.
Yes, and later we're not allowed,
and later we're shut down by lawyers.
That's right.
I mean, I still see mud bowls out there, though, Doug, where people play games in the mud. I don't know how they get away with it. I appreciate you saying that. And I had the opportunity to meet with someone that I never thought I would meet, and he was the author of a book called Play It Safe. His name was Jack Crabtree. He was, I think, the director of Youth for Christ New York for a long time. And now he's on staff at a church, and his groups go with Mission Discovery. And it was just a really cool visit. He's now written a book called Play It Safe. We've implemented much of his book into our trips when it comes to safety and insurance and those kinds of things. But Jack Crabtree has written a new book called Play It Safer. So we think about those things deeply. Of course, we're not, Doug, parents don't know this, when you're choosing an agency to go with, that we're not going to take high school students where we know there's known danger. We're just not going to do that.
Correct.
I've always thought of Mission Discovery trips as mission education. That this is never going to be the real life story of a long-term missionary who's on the field. This doesn't match that. So if I can put them in front of someone who is a missionary to hear their story or have them experience the plight of the poor, I really believe I've done well. So I view it as that. And how can I do that safely in the span of sometimes just really 5 days on the field? How does that happen? So safety is a big thing for us. We talk about it often, and it's a big deal.
Absolutely, it's a big deal. And our mutual friend, Jack Larson, I know you travel with Jack. My first missions trips were with Jack. In fact, I might have never taken a mission trip if it wasn't for him, because I saw him at an event and he said, "Doug, you need to go on a mission trip with me." I said, yeah, it sounds good, Jack. And I walked away going, I don't think so.
I did the same thing.
Did you? I didn't know that.
Yeah, see, my first mission trip was in Ann and I was a top 40 disc jockey in Huntsville, Alabama, and a volunteer with Youth for Christ. The director of Youth for Christ came into the radio station one day to drop off an announcement for an event they were doing, and he said to me, "Would you and Ann like to go to Guatemala next summer to do disaster relief work?" And so that was in 1975. There had been a massive earthquake near Chimaltenango and Antigua in 1975 that killed upward of over 23,000 people. And so I said, well, I'll talk to Ann. We've been married for just a few months, and I went home thinking she would say, "Are you crazy? You lost your mind?" But I did ask the director of Youth for Christ in Huntsville, I said, "What does it pay?" And they said, No, you got to pay them. I said, "That's strange. I have to pay them." And so I went home, and Ann said, "Yeah, I'd love to do it." That next year, we quit our jobs and went to Guatemala for 8 weeks, lived in a tent, and did disaster relief work. 8
and
that was the
weeks. Wow.
8 weeks, yeah. And that was a guy named Gary Fagan with Youth for Christ who led that trip. I thought, in all fairness, Gary, he would probably say the same thing. It was probably about the worst mission trip I've ever been on. Mm-hmm. And our tents were near a graveyard, a mass graveyard. Our water system was contaminated. And after that trip, I thought, I don't really ever have to do one of these again. And so Jack Larson said, "Hey, would you like to go with me to the Dominican Republic and take some students?" And at that time, I was on Youth for Christ staff, and I said, "I've done that before. I don't think so." He says, "No, really, it's a well-organized thing." And I said, "Well, I'll go. I'll take a couple of staff." We went with Jack Larson to Dominican Republic. We had an awesome time. It was myself and 2 other staff Youth for Christ, and it was very powerful. Jack was, for me, became a mentor. He was my mentor in this realm of short-term missions, and I eventually left Youth for Christ to found World Servants and then Mission Emmanuel. And just spoke with Jack last week. I was in the same place, Doug. I wasn't sure I wanted to do this. And he was organized. He had a plan. It was just well done.
And Jack is very persuasive. I got a call, and he says, Doug, why don't you go to the Dominican Republic with me on a go-see tour? I have you a free plane ticket. Oh, no. I got a free plane ticket? Oh, okay, Jack. Well, let me get back. Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, obviously. Yeah. And I'd been overseas before, but I had this fear that struck me, which I believe was more common than not to be it was a spiritual attack to say, no, you're going to die there, and no, this is unsafe. And I'd been all over the place. I'd never had fear before. Been behind the Iron Curtain in Russia when I was 18 with a band. I mean, how insane is that? And no fear. And then I was struck with fear, but that began a long period of mission trips with him, and then with you, with Mission Discovery, and I felt like Mission Discovery was home. And mostly because of you. I loved Jimmy. I loved Jimmy Castro and Jimmy Rivera and all those guys, but for some reason I related with you on those things. Okay. There's one question I always ask people on this episode, and people are probably going to write me and go, why don't you just let Maury talk and just shut up? But we're going to go this way, back and forth a little bit. And that is, during that time, the person who led you to Christ while you're at the radio station, give people a little bit of history of your family life, your dad, then how amazing it was that you came to know Christ in that way.
I remember my family standing out to me, and certainly not knowing that it was different than any other family, but standing out to me as early as age 3. My mom would take us out of the bed in the middle of the night, and we would go and sleep in the car. Over many years, we would leave the home to get away from my dad, who was a very violent alcoholic. My dad was a World War II veteran. He's a hero. He had been a part of the invasion of France 4 days after the D-Day invasion. He and troops entered France, and the cliffs had been cleared, and he got to Saint-Lô, France, and he was hit by machine gun fire there. And his left arm was just riddled. He says he remembers putting a tourniquet on it, passing out. And then the next thing he remembers is waking up on a hospital ship. So that arm was amputated. So when my dad came home from the Army, a man without Christ has to deal with those feelings. Prior to the loss of his arm, he'd been a prisoner of war twice, tortured by having his teeth pulled. So, hey, without Christ, he really just turned to alcohol. And alcohol is the number of the feelings. I think about that scripture that says, don't be drunk with wine, but be filled with the Holy Spirit. And I think about that verse. I think of it as this, is that the Holy Spirit, he sensitizes us to the needs, our own needs, the needs of those around us. Drunk with wine desensitizes us to those needs, numbs those feelings. Without the Holy Spirit, my dad turned to alcohol to numb those feelings rather than deal with them. In high school, just dreamed of ways of getting away from home. And as soon as I graduated from high school, I left home and went to college and got involved in radio. I was at the radio station one night. Barry Stevens, who was the president of the student body at the University of North Alabama at the time, had a book laying next to the turntable in the radio station, and I was about to take the next shift, and I asked him what the book was, and he said, it's the Bible. And I said, well, I've read it, but I really don't get much out of it. And he said, well, why don't we have lunch tomorrow at the Student Center, and let's talk about that. And I said, I'd love to, I can't tell you that I've had that kind of experience with seeing somebody come to the Lord like that, but God was already at work in my heart. As a child, I talked to him and asked him to save me from my dad. We're talking, this was we hid butcher knives in our home from him and locked our doors at night when we knew he was drunk. We were really afraid of him and his ability. He didn't fight fair. When he was drunk and fight, he was swinging an artificial arm. So for me, I didn't understand who Christ was. I certainly talked to God. as a child. And so when Barry said, let's have lunch, I said, sure. I was willing to do that. Had lunch, then went to the steps of the Student Center. And Barry asked probably one of the most two powerful questions I've had asked in my life. He says, Maury, do you know you have a Heavenly Father who loves you? Okay, so here's a new sentence for me, father and love. We had never heard my parents say to me that I love you, or heard them say to each other that I love you. It's not a part of my memory that love, the language of love, was a part of our family. So to hear father and love in the same sentence was a new sentence for me. And here's what I said to Barry. I said, well, I really thought he was angry at me. And he said, no, he loves you very much. And he says, who's been running your life? And I said, well, I have. Then he pulled out a little book that was published by Campus Crusade, I think, called Steps to Peace with God. And it had little pictures on it. It was a little small track. And I didn't know that word at the time, but it was a little track and a little small booklet. And it had drawings. It had seems like I remember a chair in a chair and like a throne. And Barry said, who is it who's on the throne of your life? Who's in the driver's seat? And I said, again, it's me. And he says, God wants to be in that place. He said, but because you've run your own life, God calls that sin. To continue in that, well, you'll be forever separated from him. And so in my mind, I was thinking, I thought he loved me, So, and he says, what if I told you that in your place? And I said, I guess I would be amazed. And who was that? I mean, I am the guy that you definitely want to talk to and about coming to Christ, because I am like open. I'm not antagonistic. I don't have huge arguments for you. I really believe there is a God. I did not know the function of Jesus. This is Florence, Alabama. This is the Bible Belt, Doug, and I didn't know this stuff. I'd only been invited to church by a friend who said he would get a Bible if he had 10 friends come or something like that. So I wasn't part of a reward, but I didn't know who the person of Christ was. And he said that was the function of Jesus. He came to earth and he died for you so that you could live forever. And so he said simply, would you like to accept what Jesus did for you on the cross to pay for your sin? And I said, I was thinking, like, who wouldn't want this? This is such a simple presentation. He went much deeper than this, and we talked more. But one of the most incredible things was when it came time that he wanted to pray, he said, well, let's pray. And he didn't bow his head. He kept his eyes open. He said, God, this is Maury. Maury's been running his own life. Haven't you, Maury? And I said, yes. And just looked around like, where is he? And then a guy came by, walked by the steps and said, hey, Barry, how's it going? I said, excuse me, God. Good to see you, John. And, and says, catch you later, catch you in class. God, back to Maury. And I thought, he's talking to God like he's here, like he's real. And that was my experience of coming to Christ on the front steps of the Student Center at the University of North Alabama. Barry became a roommate, and I, along with a handful of guys Barry had chosen, went through a year-long study of the book of Romans. And he never used the word discipleship, either, Doug, and Barry was really good at de-churching his vocabulary. He just loved me. He never loaded up church words on me. Not that that's bad. I just don't remember when people says, were you discipled? I'm thinking, I don't know. I was really loved well. And I was in this Bible study. I think it was a discipleship group, So after college, as I mentioned, I went to Guatemala. I was still a disc jockey. Went to Guatemala. Ann and I did after we were married, and then returned. And then Ann and I were down in Florence visiting my mom and dad. And my wife started talking to my dad, and the conversation led to God. He brought it up. My wife said, Curtis, do you know you have a Heavenly Father who loves you? It's the same thing Barry had said to me. And I thought, no, Ann, don't do this. Don't do it. I was scared to death. I thought, this guy, he is going to come unglued on you. He sat there and he listened and he gave his life to Christ, Doug.
Well, and remember you talking about he and Ann had some things in common.
Yeah, they're both excellent salespeople. it turns out, my dad was eventually an Internal Revenue Service agent, worked for the IRS in Alabama. He served tax on moonshine whiskey. Go figure. That's what he did for the IRS. They called him a revenue officer. But to get there, he was a salesman for Ellen Berry Company, and my wife is now, turns out that she's an incredible realtor. So they would talk about, my dad was blown away by her sales ability. They would talk sales when we go visit him in Florence. So is that what you were talking about?
Yeah. That translated love to him. And God sets us up with people that are like us a lot of times, not always, but that are like us so that we can actually hear what they're saying when it comes to him. And I thought that was very unique when I heard you talk about that she was a great salesman, which I didn't know until we talked about that. I believe we were on the Jamaica trip, and you were telling me how she had led him to Christ and that they were salespeople. And I tell you what, salespeople that are natural salespeople, they're an entity unto themselves. They're quite unique.
Yeah, she is a jewel indeed. So really what did is, I don't know if I'm saying this right or if you'll get a pushback from your podcast, but I married my dad's salvation,
I understand that. If the other guys don't, they can struggle with it for a while. But yes.
I'm just grateful, and of course, and so now people say, well, what have you done with that upbringing? Well, Doug, you've been on enough mission discovery trips. I'm not always the speaker at those events. I really like telling my story because in a crowd of like 40, in a crowd of 55, there would be 7 people in that crowd who have a similar story to mine.
Mm-hmm.
And last summer, I said that. We had a crowd of 55, and I said, in this group, there are 7 of you who have this story as well. And like me, when I was in high school, for you, it's a secret, too, because I was told not to tell anybody, or my dad could lose his job, not to tell anybody. As a child of an alcoholic, you learn really 3 rules. Don't talk, don't trust, and whatever you do, don't feel. And so I spent years in counseling to learn how to trust again. And this is post coming to Christ, Doug. How to trust again.
Yes.
How to identify my feelings. If you had asked me, pre-counseling, how I dealt with my dad, alcoholic, I'd say, great, Doug. I'm just great. And I would smile through a terrible story of what it was like. I would literally smile through the entire story that I would just told you, because smiling helped me deal with the pain. If I could lighten that with laughter or a smile or a chuckle, or it didn't really impact me, then I could get through that story. But now, for me to hear my own words saying that my wife led my dad to Christ, my voice rattles when I tell that. Still, I've told it hundreds of times. Mm-hmm. And it still moves my heart. Don't talk about problems is what that means. Mm-hmm. Don't trust and don't feel. So I learned through like 4 years of counseling what feelings are. For our kids growing up, we had feelings check every dinner meal. And so we boiled them down to happy, mad, glad, or sad for kids,
Yes.
And so how do you feel? Fine. Fine is not a feeling. Happy, mad, glad, or sad. I'm happy. Now I still go to the grocery store, Doug, and somebody says, how's your day? I'm happy. And they say, happy? well, that's unique. It catches people off guard. Or I really report, I'm sad at the grocery store because I am unwilling to not get the full value of what I pay for counseling. So I'm gonna use it everywhere I go. So So today I'm happy to talk to you.
You've gone through counseling. You've done these things. Now you're happy, and people are going, "What?" And
well, I'm a mixed bag. I'm happy. I'm sad. I'm mad. I'm glad. Just to summarize, I'm all those things sometimes at once. And when all of this really cranked up for me, at least the counseling piece and getting professional help for what I'd been through, happened when I interviewed for the youth pastor position at a church called Hendersonville Chapel in Hendersonville, Tennessee, which is really close to where I live now. So I went in for the interview, and it was probably like any other youth ministry interview that any of you guys would go on. However, they gave me a capabilities test, the DISC test, and And then I went in to meet with Floyd Dawson, who was a counselor, the staff counselor. He was a licensed therapist who was on church staff. Not explored really in a healthy way at all. At this point, I'd not had any counseling. But he asked me to do a family of origin chart so he could get a picture of my family. He had no idea of my background, and he was just curious about it. And he really did it like it looked like an upside-down pyramid, a family of origin chart. So, it's like circles represent people. So he said, these circles represent, give me 5 descriptions of each of your grandparents on both sides of your family. So, I had a traditional 4 grandparents, or took this work home and described them, and then their children, my dad, my mom, and then myself with 5 adjectives, my brothers and sisters. I have a younger brother, and an older sister. And so I came back a day later with this information and laid it out for him. And at the end of the chart, all I remember Floyd saying is, "Oh, my." And that's all he said. He said, "Have you ever had any help with what you went through?" And I smiled. I laughed. No. Just Christ has changed me. I'm grateful to God. And he said, I think there's more for you to know. And they hired me, Doug. That's all he said to me. That there's more for you to know. They hired me. I was a year into the job, and then some trauma had happened. This was pre my dad coming to Christ. More trauma had happened down in Alabama. I'm up in Nashville area, and I'd heard about some things going on in Alabama and related to my dad and his alcoholism and my mom, and some things that were going on with my brother. And I saw some patterns happening in my brother's life that would relate to him having these struggles because of my dad's alcoholism. Mm-hmm. Really, I would call it, not knowing what to call it back then, I would call it depression. My joking around wasn't working anymore. And I came to this place where I thought, it would be better for me to not be alive right now. And I don't want to live. And I had, of all things to have happened, right while I was having these thoughts, I had a scheduled middle school lock-in coming up. So I'm thinking, good grief, what awful timing. I thought lock-ins were not of God anyway.
And they're not. I'm glad you confirmed that. I say that a lot. And yes, they're definitely an idea of the devil. Right.
Ann had seen some stuff going on in me emotionally enough to tell a friend who was a drug and alcohol counselor. Her name was Robin Tillman. And so preparing for that, I was in my office getting a few things ready, pulling out like marker cones and things like that for the lock-in. And Robin came into my office. Man, I really wasn't feeling well, emotionally drained from all this information that I've heard about my family and these crazy, what I now call suicidal thoughts. And she walked into my office and she said, "I know what you're going through. I want to give you the hug your dad never gave you."
Oh.
And I looked at her and I said, and I didn't know she'd been talking to Ann. I said, "Get out of my office. Just get out of here." And I just started bawling. Go away. Get out of here. I don't know what to do. She probably violated what a counselor should do, right? I don't really usually use the word should, but she walked over and hugged me. And I broke, wept.
Wow.
She said, "I have a meeting for you to go to tomorrow night. I'm going to pick up both you and Ann. Ann is also a child of an alcoholic." So we both went to an AA meeting for adult children of alcoholics, run by Steve and Donna Renner in Nashville, Tennessee, and down in the basement of the United Methodist Church right across from Vanderbilt. And the rule is, first meeting of those things, they told us that we can't speak, we can only listen. And I think that would be a great rule for other kinds of meetings, too. It's like, you can only listen today.
That's right.
So I had to listen, and it was like these individuals who were sharing their stories were just unfolding my life, and they were free to talk about it in a way that I still carried the secret, Doug. I was still an obedient child that I would not divulge, except in a chit-chatty, joyful way that I had endured my dad's alcoholism, and he was going to be okay. He was a happy guy. He was really kind. So heard these people. Eventually, I could talk the next week, and I told my story. There's no crosstalk allowed in those meetings, in AA meetings. Crosstalk meaning that nobody can try to fix you. They can only share their experience. So no one would say, for example, well, Doug, if I were you, I would do this. And you can't do that. That's crosstalk. You can only say, thank you for sharing, Doug. My personal experience as a child is this. You can only talk about your stuff. And gosh, it was so good for me. And this was a group I was in for a year. And eventually, Donna and Steve Renner opened a private practice. And because I didn't, I was paid on a youth pastor's salary, I really couldn't afford individual counseling. I really didn't need to afford it. They had a group. It was like $10 a week. And it turned out I was in a group with a facilitator in that group of all women for 4 years. Eventually, a couple of guys came into the group later, but this was awesome for me. Anne loved it because these ladies weekly would give me the hardest time in love. I was really in love and weren't allowed. I remember I started crying during one meeting. That lady came over and touched me and just put her hand on my shoulder. And the counselor said, "Can I ask you why? I want to stop you from touching him. Can you tell me why you touched him?" I mean, it was that intense. And she said, "Well, I just felt bad for him." I said, "No, tell me, what was your purpose in touching him?" And she said, "I wanted him to stop crying." And she just went in on that lady. And I'm thinking, it's true. It's like when she touched me, I stopped crying. I just stopped. And it wasn't therapeutically stopping. It was like I shut down. And the counselor wanted me to feel my feelings. And I've noticed that in me. So, when people start weeping, and my tendency is I want to go over and put my hand on their shoulder and comfort them, I don't do that. I let them cry. I let them finish. And then I may, at the end, say, "Can I have your hand?" and pray. I just learned so much from those ladies and eventually the guys that came in to that group. And so that was the beginning of healing that still is going on today. Started at a middle school lock-in with Robin Tillman's choosing to hug me with the hug that my dad never gave me. One night, years later, my dad called me. He never called Doug, called the house. And it was an awkward call at first. And he said, "How are you doing?" It was chit-chatty. And he said, "Hey, well, I'll let you go. I want you to know that I love you." Oh. What? Are you kidding me? And I put that this was a corded phone in the kitchen. It was like a 22-foot corded phone. So we had them so we could cook and walk all over the place. But I put my hand over the mouthpiece, and I said, "Anne, he just told me he loved me for the first time." I was well into my 40s when that happened. And does it happen that way for everybody every time? No. And I know some people listening to this have had their alcoholic or drug-using mom or dad pass away before they could ever reconcile. And there is still healing. And then there is still peace. I remember that there were some things I needed to say to my dad that it really wasn't of value for him to hear. And I remember this therapist placing an empty chair in the room in front of me and said, "Your dad's sitting there. Talk to him. Tell him what it is that's on your heart." So I did that, because the idea is not to bring harm, to an individual. It's really to bring healing. And I think some things that I felt about my dad may not have been true, and it may not have been good for him to hear, but I could still get it out. And it's good for me to hear myself say it, talk through it. But I'm excited about the healing work that God is doing in my life. Now I'm reading a book now called Unoffendable. And even the title is very offendable to me. I'm walking in this place. I find Doug. I'm easily offended, and I don't know that it's my right to be offended at times. And I hear believers talk about righteous anger. And I get that. Scripture talks about that. I'm not deep enough into the book right now to give you a real synopsis, but I'm loving what I'm hearing right now. So I'm still learning, still growing.
You and I have dealt with people going through what you went through, but they never get over. I mean, there's things in our childhood that I still am not over. And I had a good life. I mean, I listen to your story. I listen to a lot of people's story. I had a great life, but there's still scars. And if I had a great life and there's still scars, how about people who have had a horrible life in their childhood?
The challenge for a youth minister who is like you or I is how do we, is that of value for us in our ministry? The answer quickly is yes. How do we unfold that in a way that is age appropriate? I more than likely I was right in the middle of being a youth pastor at the time when I was having this stuff unfolded in my life. And I was just raw. Scripture was alive to me. Well, I camped out for 2 years with our youth group, verse by verse, and just loved the Word. But how to unfold my experience for a high school group, I was not the middle school. I oversaw middle school, but I didn't teach there. But how do I unfold this in an appropriate way that would help somebody who is just like me, who has the secret of addiction in their family, let this come out? And it happened more than once in our youth group. I was able to do that. And I can't recall if I unfolded it appropriately or not. But I did have accountability every week. I met with Floyd Dawson, the licensed therapist, tell him what I was going through, what was happening in youth group, and what were the challenges and hurdles. And so I had accountability there. How is this unfolding in youth group? What you're having happen in counseling? So we would talk about those things. My memory's foggy on how that went, but as far as me in youth group and unfolding these things. But I do know this, the more vulnerable I was, more kids came. And that didn't seem to be important to me at the time either. But I noticed that people wanted vulnerability.
Yes.
There's a lot of talk about that today, and Ann and I've been reading as much of Brene Brown as we like, and I love what she has to say about vulnerability. So,
give us the name of that book. Who is that again that you just said?
That's Brene Brown. Her intro into the world was a TED Talk where she was vulnerable about her depression, her own personal depression. She was a shame researcher and had a great talk. So look it up on YouTube when we're done here. But Brene Brown on the shame researcher TED Talk.
I love TED Talks. There's some junk out there, but there's some incredible information that's coming through TED Talks. And there's even some believers that are on there that are major people in Christianity that they've invited in to speak. In relationship to warmth and hugs and things like that, can we talk about on here your angel experience, or is that too much?
Oh, yeah. Wow. Yeah, I don't think I've ever shared this publicly. I think you and I talked about this.
That's why I'm asking permission.
Yeah. No, well, you can decide whether you can use it or not. Doug, I have forgotten the name of the movie, but it was about an angel who wanted to become a human.
City of Angels.
The way he would do that. City of Angels, right?
Yeah.
Nicolas Cage, right?
Yes.
And so, it was a real weird movie. One thing was that he was an angel who became a human, and he was laying in his room one night, and when he was an angel, you could see angels like sitting all over these buildings, watching people. And after that movie, I thought, I don't really ever want to have a bored angel. I want my angel to be like, whoa. You won't believe where he's going now. So that actually motivated me after a Donald Miller read to say yes to every invitation I got for 1 full year. But so that was another offshoot from that movie and Donald Miller book. And then Nicolas Cage, after he became a human, was laying in a bed or in a room somewhere, and he said, "I know you're here, but I just can't see you." So one night, a really traumatic time in mission discovery history, and this was around 2008 when everything crashed financially for mission discovery financially, and then the cartel moved into Reynosa, Mexico. We could no longer safely take students into Reynosa to build houses. And for mission discovery, we had prepared for moments like these. We had built up a cash reserve because we loved Dave Ramsey and his thoughts on cash reserves and emergency fund. But this one would stretch us to the edge of that emergency fund to the place where we have to trust you now, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've run out of our own strength. So
funny how that happens.
Anyway, how about that? So it would have been good to start there with we need you now, God. We have an emergency class. It was very, very traumatic. We rely on trip fees as well as donations at Mission Discovery to make life work financially there, and things really were hard. I don't know if you wake up pondering deep thoughts at 3 a.m. when you have to, but that's when it happened with me. And so I said, I knew God was present. I knew He was never more present than now for me. And this is the God I spoke to when I was a child. And I said, God, I just imagine that angels are all around me. And I said, I know you're here. I just can't see you. So I had this sense. I searched around on the internet, Googled this to see if there had been anybody else's experience, but I just felt this sense of it was almost like somebody had placed an incredibly tight, some sort of scuba suit around me and was just pulling it tight all over my body. It was like this incredible hug. I only reported it to you because I figured you wouldn't say, well, there goes our relationship. You wouldn't do that to me.
No, and let me tell you, I ask people, missionaries especially like yourself, if they have an angel story. Now, I don't have a particular angel story that I can say I know it was an angel that God had used to, we obviously have the Holy Spirit in us. Not obvious to everybody, but we know that we don't count on angels above God, but they are His messengers, and the Scripture says that we have a guardian angel. One of my friends, Messianic Jew friends, says that we each have two. I'm amazed at people that have angel stories, and that's why I asked you. I just said, hey, Maury, do you have an angel story?
Yeah.
And so continue on.
I do, yeah. Didn't know how to explain it, and didn't say anything to Ann for a long time. It probably happened 3 times, and it's happened at times when it seemed like the giants were big. They're bigger than normal giants.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so I always hesitate. You can hear the hesitation in my voice. I wouldn't ever want to call this into being for somebody else. But you really need to try this. Or it was just my experience, but it was a physical sense that the most incredible physical sense of just a grip on my skin over my whole body. And I've not found that to be any experience from anybody else yet. But I'm just very grateful to God for that.
Yeah, and I think it's unique from what I've heard to different people. And your thing, the reason I related it was because your father and the counselor with her hug to you. Yeah,
there's a connectivity there, isn't there? I certainly have seen miracles happen, in the field and over, but this was a new experience for me.
For those of you guys that feel stretched by this a little bit, go look it up. Billy Graham has a book on angels. We always think of it as somebody else. I just heard one the other day about a lady being attacked, and then the attackers ran from her because they saw this 10-foot warrior behind her with a sword, and different things like that. You hear about those things, but we think that they're far, far away from us. So what was your worst moment in Mission Discovery ministry?
We had just loaded 3 tractor-trailer trucks of lumber heading to Reynosa, Mexico. These tractor-trailer trucks contain pre-cut, color-coded lumber. That's what you would see on the work site when you'd arrive over there in Reynosa. So, yes. These are packages of houses. So we'd pre-cut them with a team over in McAllen, Texas. Then we would take them over to Mexico, clear their customs, and then deliver them to a warehouse over there, and then they would be distributed to work sites. So, it was actually, I thought, a pretty massive, well-coordinated operation. Drivers were excellent. So we put the lumber on the truck, and I was behind the last truck of 3. And we took a turn, a curve in a road, and I could see that he was going too fast. And sure enough, the back left wheel, as he was taking this left curve, tipped up on the tractor-trailer truck, and the truck overturned. All of that lumber spilled out. The truck momentarily, the cab caught fire. I ran up to where the driver was. He was laying on his side. I couldn't get to him, but the front window was cracked, so he kicked out the front window and got out of the truck, and thing was smoking. The state troopers came out, and I said, "What do I do?" And he says, "Well, let me just tell you the way it is. Your truck is overturned in the most dangerous neighborhood in our community, and if you don't pick up this lumber by 5 o'clock dark, it will be gone in the morning." And so I had no idea. I mean, this was probably, I don't know what a tractor-trailer truck load of pre-cut lumber is worth, but I'm guessing it's probably maybe about $15,000 to $20,000 worth of lumber.
Mm-hmm.
So for Mission Discovery, this would be a real bump, huge bump financially. And so I called the lumber company who had sold us the lumber, McCoy's. I'd met the owner of the company years back, Brian McCoy, great guy, and then his staff in McAllen, Ruben Valdez and Ram there at the lumber company says, "We'll be right out with forklifts." And they drove yard forklifts. Those are the ones with smooth tires. These are I guess would be like they're not yard forklifts. They'd be meant for smooth concrete surfaces.
Mm-hmm.
They drove those down a road about 8 miles, lifted all of our lumber back onto their trucks, took it back to McCoy's, restored it for us. And then I had to call the insurer. We had the load insured. And they said, "Well, your load was insured, and here's the settlement amount. We're going to give me money where I could buy other lumber, but some of it was just slightly damaged." And so they said, "Where can we pick up the salvage?" And so I said, "What if I bought the salvage from you, bought it back?" And they said, "What's your offer?" And I thought, well, what about half price? And so we made $7,000 on that spill.
Wow.
Profit after it was all over with because of the insurance settlement and me being able to buy that cheaper lumber that was slightly damaged. But it didn't look good at first. So I went to Arturo Molina's that night before we knew all of this information about insurance and settlements. And I said, "What am I going to do?" And he said, "Stick your hands out, palms up." He says, "In whose hand is Mission Discovery? Those hands or his hands?" I said, "Now it's in his hands." It's in his hands, isn't it?
Honest answer.
He said, "Yeah, he likes it. I wonder if it's been in my hand. I wonder."
I think all of our ministries are in our own hands at many, many times, and that's the struggle, and that God understands, and that He keeps chipping away at us and helping us to give it over to Him. That's why He allows us to get in some tight spots, just so He can say, "Okay, you ready for me now?"
We've all taken ministries in our hands. I don't really know when I've done it until I discover that in a situation like that, at times, not at times, all the time, that in those hard times, that He really does have it. I've not been in control of anything. I
tell people when we're in ministry, we're in the midst of the battle. We don't always see or hear or understand what we're doing and what we're holding on to, because when you're in the midst of the battle, you're about to fight.
Mm-hmm.
You're just fighting. And sometimes you're smart enough to call on the air patrol to come in and take out the enemy. And we don't call a lot of times until we're in such dire straits. So tell me your best ministry moment. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was in Reynosa, Mexico. It was it was not a mission trip with a team. It was a church missions pastor named Richard from San Antonio wanted to visit a church that you're familiar with down in the garbage dump in Reynosa. Pastor Juan Reyes was down there, Doug, and you guys built a house down there. And
yes.
Juan had a vision for a youth center to be built next to his church. And Richard from San Antonio wanted to have he and a friend come down and visit with him and take up a collection to help see if they could be a part of this vision. And I said, great, I'll meet you down there. I flew to McAllen, Texas. I got there a couple of days before Richard would come down because there's no telephone communication between pastors who live in dumps. And so I went over to Juan's house, and he wasn't home. I had Arturo Molina with me, a friend, the same friend who had asked me whose in whose hands was the ministry. And so Arturo and I went over to Juan's house and left a note on the door. A friend said he was out on his bicycle running some errands, and we left a note that we would be back the next day with Richard, who would like to visit with him. We went back over to McAllen, Texas. Next day, picked up Richard at the airport, drove back over to the garbage dump in Reynosa, went to Juan's house. Our note was still on the door. Oh man, what in the world? And I don't know what it is about these kinds of things that can happen this way. That another lady came up and said, "Oh, Juan doesn't stay in that house. That is his house, but he really stays next door." We really put the note on the wrong door. And I said, "Where is he?" And they said, "Well, he ran another errand on his bicycle." I thought, man, these guys are going to fly out tomorrow morning. So I gotta make this happen. So Arturo came to me and said, "Maury, you need a plan B." So I said, "Richard," I said, "Why don't we? There's about you and your church youth group built a house over in Rio Bravo, Mexico. It's about 15 miles from where we were. Why don't we drive over there and look at the house, and then we'll come back and see if Juan has returned?" And he said, "Well, okay, sounds good." So we drove over to Rio Bravo, and we found that house that church youth group had built, and we drove. As we drove up, I had another oh no moment, and it didn't look like, you could tell in those homes if nobody had been living there for a while, because of course the door was locked, but it didn't look like grass was worn down and things like that. It looked like it had not been lived in for a while. So I thought, oh, this is sad, because sometimes a family could. We've been deceived in building a house a time or two, and I wondered if this was one of those. But we checked with a neighbor, and they said, no, the mother-in-law of this lady was very sick, so she moved in with her to take care of her, and they still came back to the home to check on it often. But they were living with her while she was really sick, and they expected them to be back someday, but they weren't here for now several weeks. And so I said, well, Richard, we at least know how to pray for the family, and that's good. I said, let's go back over to Reynosa and see if we can catch Juan. We were walking back out into the middle of the street, and Arturo said, Maury, did you ever get a hold of Juan? I said, no. He says, look down there on that bicycle. Is that Juan Reyes? 15 miles from where we were supposed to see him, hopefully. He had no idea we were in town, and he is in this town where we are. This is like a million plus people in this area, How in the world? And so he came up, and I said, Juan, did you hear that we were over here? And he's on a bicycle. Clearly, he had cycled 15 miles to get to us. He says, no, I'm surprised to see you. What are you doing here? I said, Juan, we came specifically to meet you. This is Richard from San Antonio, and he wants to see the youth center. And we were blown away. We just said, I looked at Richard. I said, Richard, a lot of takeaways from this moment right here, but here's one. It is God's will for you two to know each other. And this is certainly that sign. And if you ever thought of partnering with anybody for a youth center, this is your man right now. We were blown away. We couldn't believe it that God would orchestrate this for us to know for sure that we were on track. And it started off with like, oh no, an oh no moment. And how in the world could that have happened? That still stands as one of the best. And then one other short one was we were in Rio Bravo. We built a lot of little houses along a railroad track, and there was a place where the road ended, along the railroad track, and there was a family there. And I didn't often do this. Families were grateful to receive a home. We asked them to partner in the construction of their home as part of the equity. We felt it brought dignity to the process. They risked losing their jobs if they came and helped us, and it was a big investment for them to help build their house. And there was a family that was just diligent in helping to build their house. They had two small children, and it's that I have this family and a picture of me and them as an icon on my desktop at home. But I asked the little guy, I said, "What does it mean to you to have this house here?" And he says, "Well, it means that I get to go to school in dry clothes, because when it rained, all of my school clothes would get wet."
Oh, my.
And he said, and he's a little guy, he's like 11, and he said, and he started crying, and he said, I won't be made fun of anymore.
Oh.
Very powerful moment.
And unless you do mission trips like this, you don't get that story. We see it in the United States, and we still have great needs in the United States. And I don't fault anybody for not going overseas. There's people with different reasons behind that, and some do some great missions within the United States. The reason I like taking students overseas are not necessarily overseas when you're talking about connected to Central America, but out of the country into third world environments, is because poverty is so everywhere. It's so distinctive. It's so everywhere. There's not even a guess that families are in extreme poverty. Whereas in the United States, we can't hide them. And there's students that go to public school in the United States of America. Their classmates have no idea that they're not sleeping well at night. They don't have heat. They don't have food. They're in poverty. But in those places, your heart is broken because it's almost everywhere. But there's two things I want to talk about. I want to talk about Africa, and I want Swaziland in particular, and I want to talk about sabbatical because the book I wrote on sabbatical, I sent you the manuscript on. But before we go there, let's talk about Africa. That is such a unique story. Tell me about the uniqueness of how the town in Swaziland happened through the other organization, and how you guys got involved.
Mission Discovery has had Africa on our radar for many years, but we don't ever go anywhere we're not invited. So every location that we go, we're invited by missionaries who see a value in having a team there and can use that team. And the value we find in a missionary invitation to a location is that they get to tell their story, and that's what's so powerful about this place in Swaziland. Of course, the draw in Swaziland for any kind of ministry, particularly related to orphan care, is that at just a few years ago, Swaziland had the highest rate of HIV in the world. In fact, it was so high that it was the only country in the world with a negative in their population. In other words, the country's population was declining because of the HIV crisis. In fact, the UN had predicted at some point in the future, Swaziland at this rate would cease to exist because of HIV/AIDS. Group of people from a church in Swaziland named Potter's Wheel were deeply involved in the ministry of Teen Challenge. And Teen Challenge guys group was looking for a place to have a away from town kind of place to minister to the guys who were recovering from addictions. And so they went out to this community town called Bulimbu. It had been deserted by a mining operation and was in liquidation. Lawyers were selling off the valuable assets of the town, whatever was left, doors and windows, mining equipment. And Kevin knew the lawyer in charge of liquidation, I believe, and to Bulimbu to see if he could rent or have given to him a building he could use for his guys. And they said to Kevin Ward, the director of the Teen Challenge program and the pastor of Potter's Wheel, says, why buy one building? Why not buy the whole town? And so he said, well, how much? And they quoted a price which was really outside of their ability to pay for, but it was really, really reasonable for a whole town. So he got some guys together. including some investors from Canada, and they were able to purchase the town for this person to eventually care for 2,000 orphans. There are 150,000 plus orphans because of the HIV crisis in Swaziland. Their goal was to take 2,000 of those and teach them to be the next leaders of Swaziland. So they purchased the town, and now the town is growing and improving. They've invited teams to come and help improve the town because it was being liquidated and torn apart. They had to put it back together. But they wanted to support orphan care in a unique way. They wanted to use enterprise or businesses within the community that they would start to support orphan care. For example, the timber industry, which is thriving now there in Bulimbu, would generate income for orphan care. Bread making would not only make bread for the town, but generate income for orphan care. They have the Bulimbu honey operation there that makes honey, and they sell it to the country and in grocery stores that generate income for orphan care. They have a lodge there that they invite people to come and stay at the Bulimbu Lodge. Our teams stay there and in other housing there in Swaziland, and that income from our teams helps to pay for orphan care. Right now they have 500 children, 500 plus children that they're caring for in Bulimbu. And just recently, another mining operation has come to them and asked if they could purchase the town from them. And so Bulimbu Ministries has said, yes, but you find us a new location, and we would ask that you would pay for our move. And so they're in negotiation right now to move the entire operation a little closer to the city. That in that way they would really be closer to market for all of their businesses except for the timber industry, and that could be a real benefit to them. So new things are always happening there. The beauty of this trip is that you won't hear any mission discovery staff speaking during that week. Maybe one night we get to hear these incredible stories of these missionaries who came to Bulimbu, and there are a wide range of occupational or vocational missionaries there. You have dairy and bread making and honey operation and business office and lodge business, and so you've got all these missionaries who are there to run business, and most of our participants are curious, how in the world did you hear God's voice to do this? So we, every night, have a different one of them talk to our team about how they got to Bulimbu. Their work is exciting and ongoing, ever-changing. The challenges they face are, what with orphans not having a family, where would they call home as an adult? Where could they come back to and visit? So they've created a home for graduates to return to and for visits, short visits. And then how do you prepare an orphan who will most likely go back to his or her homestead and live for living in the outdoors? I mean, here, orphans have been cared for, all the meals provided for, schooling, everything provided for. How do we prepare them to go back and live and cook over an open fire and live back out in the elements? How do we prepare them for that? So they really came up with not a new idea, but they incorporated Royal Rangers into their program for guys and girls that teaches them camping experience, cooking over an open fire, outdoor skills. Which is survival for them. It's life. It really beyond what they already knew. That's right. So very well thought through. Our teams, every year the team size grows going over that. It's an expensive trip, and we've had individuals return there who go with Mission Discovery for longer-term stays. So there's a deep need for teachers in Bulimbu to work in the school, or needs for the trades to show up and help with issues related to the town itself. For the future, should the move happen back closer to town, there will be the same needs. All the businesses will move. There's infrastructural pieces that have to support life for 500 plus people on a campus, teachers, schools, all that. So that won't change. The trip to itself is, for many people that go on our trips, this is the fulfillment of a dream. Like you've heard it too, Doug, like I've always wanted to go to Africa. Yes. And so you have a group. This is a group of mostly adults who go on this trip, who root for my success as a team leader for this trip because they want Africa to be all that they dreamed of. However, the Scripture says that He will do immeasurably more than all we could ask or imagine. So
yes.
My general experience on not just that trip, but every mission trip is that God does immeasurably more than all we could ask or imagine. But this is the fulfillment of a dream for many people. And it wouldn't be right to go to Swaziland and not go to one of the world's best game reserves. And we spend 2 nights in Kruger Park and do a game drive on one of those days and do some tourist activities on our exit toward Johannesburg.
Which is what another thing I love about good student ministry, and that is there is a day or two to where it's about them seeing the elements, seeing the land, seeing the beauty of where they are, and enjoying some of those things. People, they're always wanting students to, we want them to go out there and work, or not always, but some of those people that don't understand. As adults, we don't want to just go out there and work. We want to go out there and work, and we also want to experience the greatness of where we are. And so I think that is just amazing. Now, speaking of greatness, I wrote this book on sabbatical called Rest Up. I call your office, and I called, and Tina Castro was your secretary at the time. And she said, well, listen, Maury is on sabbatical. I said, oh, she says, and we're not supposed to contact him. I said, well, listen, don't contact him. I said, I've been on sabbatical, and you're right. You shouldn't be contacted. I said, but so when he gets back, here's the script, and I'd like him to read it and see what he thinks about what I've written about rest and about sabbaticals and all that. She says, no, I want to send it to him. So she sent it to you, and you read it. And I want to talk about your sabbatical.
Well, my first sabbatical was only 2 years ago, and it was my first, and was a decision our board made. And I don't know what kind of thinker I was, but I actually fought it, and I really thought that our board was like not thinking correctly to send me away and have no contact with Mission Discovery for mine was only 6 weeks. It seemed like a lifetime to me. I anticipated it. So my first one only 2 years ago.
Yes, and which was your last one.
It would be my last one. I'm about to head on another kind of sabbatical here, but
that's right. Tell me about number one. I wish I had gone on done my sabbatical with you planning it for me, because your sabbatical.
So you heard about mine.
Oh yeah, yours was quite amazing. But tell me about the book. Do you remember what you said about what I wrote about a couple of things? There's a couple of things I said that came to pass on your sabbatical while you're there.
Yeah, something about like you may have to remind me, but I do. The thing that stuck out for me post sabbatical, after sabbatical, that things seem to roll off of me. Like, and Tina daily, I don't know if this is everyone's life, and maybe it's not daily for me, but somebody will make a passing comment, and sometimes it's like, oh, was that a shot? I think it was a shot. And I remember going back to my men's group that meets every Thursday morning at 7 for like 12 years, and a friend said something to me that was snarky and a bit of a shot about something I may have missed emotionally in the conversation. And the shot part just rolled off of me. It didn't impact me like it would have before. I would have resonated over it in the past. I'm glad I'm reading this unoffendable book too, because it seems like it's heading in that same direction of unoffendable. But those little remarks tended to roll off of me.
Yeah, there are two things that I said, and this is what you respond to, and it'll tweak your memory a little bit. One was that people are going to say some very offensive phrases to you about you taking a sabbatical.
That happened to me. I heard a lot. Well, it must be nice.
Yes.
Now, my response at the time, it really is very nice. I've used, and this is dysfunctional. I know what I'm about to say is dysfunctional, but I would mask that a little bit with, it really was my idea.
Right.
And the thing is like, the consequence of this thing and being a godly decision from our board of directors, it was not my idea. However, it was God's idea for me to go. Yeah, but I caught that shot from people saying, well, it must be nice to be able to do that. I realized this is not a privilege that the regular working world has. And that was my thinking until our board chairman said, no, let me just tell you what, McDonald's executive employees are being required to take a creative sabbatical. He says it's becoming very commonplace in the non-ministry world for sabbaticals to happen as well. I said, really? And so I was impressed by that.
Well, which is one of the things to write in the book, because I'm also directing it. Most people in ministry will think I'm just directing it toward ministry, but I am directing it toward people as a whole, because I believe most of us are walking around in such a dazed, tired state that we don't know it.
Well, what is that? How do you catch that in God's design of a rest day and respite, and what's settling down look like and its value? I certainly saw the value of 6 weeks, and honestly, for like the first 2 weeks of a 6-week sabbatical, I was really lost. I just stayed busy, eventually slowed down. Mine wound up that, I have a lot of frequent flyer miles, and I had watched a movie called The Way with Emilio Estevez, and was intrigued by this 400-mile trail across northern Spain called the Camino de Santiago. And told Ann, I said, during my sabbatical, I'd like to walk a part of the Camino de Santiago. I couldn't do the whole thing. I didn't want to take that much time, be away from her that long. But I would like to walk 100 miles. And she said, by yourself? And I said, absolutely, I'd love to. Well, Ann included a few other people. First, my nephew, Trevor. And I said, you invited Trevor? He said, why? I said, why? And she said, well, he has a backpack. I said, that's not a qualifier.
He's got a backpack.
Not just because he has a backpack. Turns out Trevor is like the most incredible nephew ever, who loves history. There's a book that a guy has written about the Camino that gives you a direction for each day, historical pieces along the way. And Trevor was into it, reading out loud. And Jimmy Rivera went along from Mission Discovery. Mark Whitler, a board member. Caleb Caruth, who used to be with a music group called Shane and Caleb, which is now Shane and Shane. And then Caleb's owner of a music distribution company. And then also Nathan Walters, who's our marketing director at Mission Discovery. And so we started each day really simply, Doug. It was really almost sabbatically. We would say, well, what is the thought for the day? It would just be one thought. So, like, I remember one was, Caleb says, restores my soul. That's it. Let's talk for that. He restores my soul. That's it. That's all we had today. No 3 points, and it was it, Nobody had to prepare it. He just said that. So we walked along the trail. And then the next day, he leads me beside still waters. We experienced that, along the way. The still waters of God. And this is a trail that was carved out over many, many years by people who wanted to visit the grave of the brother, James, the brother of Jesus, who's said to have his body part of him at least, buried in the town they named after him called Santiago. People walked this trail and carved this trail to visit Jesus' brother. James loved Spain, so they wanted his body, when he was martyred. And they buried him in Santiago at this big Catholic church. His grave is said to be there. People followed this trail, but they used the Milky Way to guide them. So they called the town eventually Santiago de Compostela. Compostela means the stars. And so it was said that you could literally follow the Milky Way from France to Santiago to visit the grave of James. A couple of young travelers tried that, and they would just walk at night. State trooper stopped them. Said, "Where are you heading?" "We're heading to Santiago de Compostela." He says, "Well, you're about 20 miles in the wrong direction south." So I would suggest you walk during the daytime and follow the yellow arrows. Really mark the trail. Clearly, the early travelers had a GPS that doesn't really work for us today, but it was very powerful. Now, my nephew said, Uncle Maury, what I've read is that you only get a certificate of completion of this segment if it was a spiritual journey. They're going to ask them a question to see if it was spiritual. And I really want to be honest, but I really would like that certificate. And he says, I don't know that it really has. I'm here for a spiritual journey. So all along the way, after a day, sort of like a 5-day walk for 100 miles. But on day 2, my nephew was saying, God is amazing, isn't he? I said, maybe just keep talking about the presence of the Lord. And Trevor, it looks like you just got your certificate. So, would you please stop talking about the Lord?
I'm on sabbatical.
It was an amazing thing, So we talked a lot about His presence and glory, and gosh, it was hard at times. But Doug, it was not easy. We started off in 16 inches of snow, and there was a group out ahead of us. When we started off, it was dark in the morning. We saw this group of like about 10 or so high school students and out in the snow in front of us at this hostel. Heads, clearly, they were praying because their headlamps that were all on were aimed down at the snow. And so I walked over to their leader and I said, "So you guys are a Christian group?" He said, "No, we're just a high school group. It's a tradition for us to pray before we go." And so I went over back to our guys, and I said, "Guys, we're in trouble. Non-Christians are praying." And so it was like dumping snow on us. And, oh, my goodness. It was a crazy start, but we had a blast. It was great. It was good for us and good to us. God spoke, and I would do it again. Nephew and I are planning to go back here in the near future and go to the beginning of that trail, which is in Saint Jean, France, and walk over the Pyrenees. That would be another 6 or 7 days. The hope would be to someday, in segments, complete the entire Camino de Santiago.
That's just amazing. And number one, it was great wisdom on your board member's part. I remember he was from Houston, I believe, in a business there, right? And was he in industry or whatever? And for him to, the first time I took a sabbatical, they had to make me. They had designed it in the church when they built it. They had to make me because none of us think we need rest until we get rest. Mm-hmm. And six weeks in, mine was 3 months each time. I had 4 of them. 6 weeks in, I got to normal, and my family would acknowledge it. First, it was just my wife. Hey, you're back. Then it was my kids. For another 5 years, he's back. And I'd hear those words, and I'm going, oh, my goodness, I didn't know I had left. And 6 more weeks, I was really refreshed. So I'm sorry you only got 6, but I'm glad you got 6 weeks because I believe the average person, and I think most senior pastors of big churches are getting 5 and 6 a year.
Oh, wow. That's good.
It is good. It is good. That's why some of these guys can last. You're obviously a hardcore guy and tough, and God made you that way through circumstances in life, but you're able to do a lot of great things, and you still are. You're retired in some people's minds, but in your own mind, you'll find that you're not retired at all, and you're still going to do all those trips.
True, and I look forward to what God has for me. I remember at the start of Mission Discovery in '91, I was at my kitchen table by myself, not knowing if this would really work, thinking that maybe someday 500 people a year would go on mission trips, and that would be good. That would be good for me. And then resonating over the second hardest question that had ever been asked of me. The first one was, actually not hardest, but the most powerful question was, do you know you have a Heavenly Father who loves you? And the second one was at the start of this journey called Mission Discovery, my pastor, Richard Bowden, down in South Florida, asking me, does God call you to do a God-sized thing or a Maury-sized thing? Whatever my journey is for the future and what, our segment of the world called retirement, which the rest of the world may not believe in, and maybe rightly so. God will call me to God-sized things. So I look forward to that, and that will. I want that to be always true for me, Doug.
And it will be. I believe it will be. And plus, you have a wife that will make sure of that as well. And this is for youth pastors. Youth pastors, if you have a spouse, God's going to use that spouse to check your judgment. Maury's wife, Ann, said, you know what? You're not going to take this trip alone. Maury, you needed those guys, didn't you?
I did. And I have had incredible partners journey with me along the way. And the first church that went on a Mission Discovery trip has gone with us every year for 26 years. They're a really big church, could do mission trips on their own and do some of that, but still choose to use Mission Discovery for many of their trips. To have friends alongside who love you and look for God's best in you, a wife who certainly capable of leading an alcoholic, violent alcoholic man to Christ, can certainly speak wisdom into me for sure.
So what would you want to say to youth pastors if you could?
For the youth leader, I really do like what I'm seeing in youth ministry related to ministry at home and overseas. So I'm always moved mostly by a youth leader who has a plan that looks at really Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the ends of the earth. Jerusalem being ministry up close, Judea a little further away, Samaria where people don't like you very much, and the ends of the earth. Because of someone's courage, Doug, you and I live in the ends of the earth because Jerusalem really is Jerusalem, right? And
yes.
So we made it over here to this part of the world because of someone's courage. And so for a youth leader to have a plan that reaches his community and the world impresses me. As far as like the details to put together a mission trip, as a youth leader, I ran my own trips out of my church for years and then decided to go with an agency for really one reason. Is because I really wanted to focus on my team and what was going on with them spiritually, what God was saying to them. And so I began to use an agency, even though I could do it myself, and let them take the headaches. That's what I found is the great gift that Mission Discovery offers is a plan of the logistics. And then just a basic skeleton structure of ministry in the form of maybe construction or VBS or orphan care, community outreach to adults. But there's so much else that a Mission Discovery experience allows the youth leader to do with his students while on that trip. And that's what we were talking about a little bit earlier, the opportunity to get off to the side and really just look at where you are and ask questions about what the future of this place looks like. What would it be like if you had not come? Are we really valuable in being here? And then to look at missions as really for your youth as missions education. This is not a short-term mission trip is not the life of a long-term missionary, but it's a glimpse into his or her story. So find mission trips that where you can expose your student to the stories of long-term missionaries. And for long-term missionaries who are listening, we would love to be a part of your schedule for that very purpose so that we can acquaint students or adults firsthand with your work and the story of how God got you there. And we are hearing stories over and over of how a single mission trip has moved people, like Doug talked about earlier, to move toward ministry, whether it's in a vocational Christian ministry or find ministry within the company that they're working in that traditionally we would call a ministry like church or evangelism or preaching or missionary, but have found a place within their own companies to reach the people that they touch daily. So those are my encouragements to youth leaders. And we offer visits for youth leaders. If they want to come and see one of our trips, you're welcome to come in and we'll cover the ground expenses. If you want to see one of our international trips, we'll cover the ground expenses for 2 or 3 days for you to see what's going on the Mission Discovery trip, and then make the decision for yourself whether you'd like to join us the next year with your team.
And Maury, we're going to close out now. I've taken enough of your time, and hopefully after you've gone through your official being the founder of Mission Discovery in September, and you're doing different things again, maybe around December, January of 2019, we can do another one of these and do a follow-up and see what life is bringing you. How does that sound?
I love it. Sounds great, Doug. Thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. Hey, tell us how people can get in touch with you and how people can get in touch with Mission Discovery.
Yeah, so at Mission Discovery, you can call us if you would like to call 800-767-8720 or email info@missiondiscovery.org for more trip information. Certainly visit the website at missiondiscovery.org. All of our trips and trip dates are listed there with trip prices and trip descriptions for both middle school, high school, and medical teams. You have a medical group going to Haiti, and we'll see over 2,000 people just in 2 weeks or so in Port-au-Prince. Also, too, if you'd like to contact me personally, if you're listening, and if we have people who are listening who resonated with my story, and you'd like to talk about a secret you've held, if I really enjoy hearing your story. You can email me at Maury, Maury, at missiondiscovery.org. I'd love to converse with you.
Thanks, Maury. I appreciate it, man. Youth Worker Nation is very indebted to you. I'm indebted to you for so many things that you've done, endured, and also created. So I'm thankful that you're able to spend this time with us on Youth Worker on Fire.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.